And what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players, an MLS podcast. It's time to go north of the border to take a dive into Toronto FC with special guest Corey Brady from Waking the Red. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm great, enjoying the frozen north. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. But again, yeah, looking forward. It's getting earlier and earlier every year as we start to see season off, and it's like into February now. So yeah, it's right around the corner, man.
Yeah, very excited. I remember back when it was like, oh man, we got to wait to the middle of March. Gosh, that's too long. And here we are, like 2 weeks away. It's insane to think about. As you can see, I'm a Red Bull supporter. I feel like I watched us play like yesterday, in the MLS Cup Finals. So as much as we love the quick turnaround, it is kind of tough to continue to put out, to take that break and put the content out and take that break, put the content out. But one thing that we can never get tired of are awesome looking scarves. So for scarf of the week, I want to throw it over to you. What are we rocking?
All right, so this was a special one. I've kept this around for a long time. So I had my bachelor party at a TFC game, and my brother organized this, and I got to give him props to that he had custom scarves made up for the everybody coming to my bachelor party. So this is going back a few years, as you can see, and it kind of helps to remember when my wedding anniversary is. But it actually is really, really special to me because we had this. It was a big surprise to me because I had friends from coming all over North America. Um, and I didn't know they were coming to the game, so they just kind of showed up, and it was a really, really cool game. I think they drew San Jose,
Uh-huh.
um, and it's a pretty safe bet that Toronto either lost or drew the game because I mean they've been dreadful for that many years. So,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, that's that. So we had custom scarves made up, and that's kind of if you get the whole part of that, and
Yeah.
also it's a double-sided one. So,
Uh-huh.
um, this is my English team, believe it or not, is I'm a Leeds United supporter, so he's got the whole service crew on there. Um, so yeah, it was a special thing to do that, and it is super hard to get custom scarves in North America. Let's just say that. So
Yeah.
I mean, we're we're just on the cusp of, I think, trying to get a lot of the custom stuff, and especially for supporters groups and everything. It's great to see, but also really hard to do. You're usually
Yes.
ordering stuff. I think he told me he had to order away from Germany to get these ones done.
Mhm.
So it's a pretty special thing. I got a couple saved. So it was a pretty special night. So
I will tell you, it's not happening anytime soon. But if and when I ever do get married and I go on a bachelor trip, I'm sending that clip to my brother and whoever needs it because that is like right up my alley. Because I've already told him like if it ever happens, the only thing I want is I want to go to a game. That's it. A bunch of my buddies, let's go to a Red Bull game and let's have some fun. But the scarf is a great touch because I'm actually a collector. Usually I have a big wall behind me. I'm at like 80 scarves now and I hang them all up,
wow.
display really nice and pretty. It's one of my best favorite parts of what we do here. That's why we have Scarf of the Week because we have so many to show off. That would be the icing on the cake. So I'm gonna have to send that to Connor, who's my co-host. He'd get a good kick out of that one. But like I said, we've got 80 scarves, and I try to get one from every team. I do have one for Toronto.
Hey.
It is one of the most bland I have. I mean, literally, it's just horizontal stripes with a little maple leaf in the middle and the logo on either end, but only on one side, I think. No, it's double side for the logo, but it's literally just horizontal stripes and a maple leaf. So, it's all right. I'm gonna have to get cool ones eventually, but my goal is to visit every stadium, and when I go there, I will pick up a much cooler scarf. I promise.
Yeah, that one I'm guessing that looks a lot from like the 2016 to 2018 era, just with
Yeah,
the the stylistic maple leaf on the back there. Um, they do have lots of scarves, but they seem to be very generic all the time. They don't like to be you know, just like the kits. They don't like to really vary away from the Adidas logo or design, right? So
yes, very, very straight and narrow, right? Well, speaking of breaking away from trends, Toronto FC cannot catch a break because ever since 2017 treble, it has been just one thing after another. This year in 2024, it was throwing allegations of coaches punching players in the tunnel, a national team drone scandal, unhappy designated players that took away from all of their on-field activities. John Herdman looked to be building something relatively decent in Toronto, but he's gone now, and Robin Fraser's back. So 2024 saw TFC finish 11th in the East. They missed the playoffs. They were runners up to Vancouver in the Canadian Championship, and they had a round of 32 exit in the Leagues Cup versus Miami, which was a great game. I believe it was 4-3 final score. So in 2025, they're going to be back in the Canadian Championship, and they're going to try and bring back some silverware. But I wanted to get your thoughts on 24 from somebody who saw it firsthand. What were you thinking about it?
So it's really interesting that we started off the Herdman era in this weird kind of big non-secret about him taking over the club. The rumor started, like, I would say probably May or June, and he officially took over in August, but didn't start coaching. He only coached one regular season game. It was the last regular season game in 2023. So we had lots of good expectations, and he brought a great reputation to the club. He coached both national teams, right? And obviously made the and qualified for the 2022 World Cup. That was fantastic. So again, we had high hopes, especially with supporters groups. It tends to be a weird scenario when the club's not doing so well. They'd like to reach out and do supporter nights. And they just actually had one last week where they bring a bunch of supporters in to talk to the coaches and the general manager and everything. So I had the chance right at the end of 2023 to go talk to John Herdman and general manager Jason Fernandez face to face about what they were thinking. And it was quite funny because they were still echoing the same things they're doing right now in, well, we need another number 9 and we need to bring in some TAM level strikers and everything like that. So the much the change, much stays the same at this club. It is a kind of a blip, I would say, about the success of the club. It was about 3 or 4 years. Nobody expected us to make the MLS Cup in 2019, and that was kind of a nice surprise. But other than that, it's been a horrible kind of result wise horrible, but it's been fun. I mean, there's never a dull moment at this club. That's the easiest way to say it. And in looking at how they make the news, it's usually not the good things that make the news, but we still are in the news, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, it is really funny for us to kind of take a step back and we were honest that we knew Herdman was kind of under the gun
Mhm.
uh, months before he kind of quote unquote resigned, right? And
Mhm.
and we can probably guess that it wasn't a unilateral decision on his behalf. It was probably quite the push. So
Yeah.
we have a new club president, and he's kind of Toronto FC is owned by Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, which is a Goliath organization in terms of sports ownership in Toronto. So they own the Maple Leafs, they own the Raptors, and they own the football team here, the Argos. And it's just they're a publicly traded company, and there's tons of media influence on there in terms of billions of dollars that they have to spend. So when we're saying, wow, a player like Insigne, for instance, he's costing us, 15, 16 million a year. They have deep pockets, and it really does show the desire to bring in big names. That was part of why Herdman was brought in, because he was a big name, right? He was a household name in Canada. But again, that was that was a disaster. That was an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
speaking of disasters, I mean, because it kind of ties right into this next section, because your disaster in the front office and I use that term only because I'm echoing you. I don't want to make people think, even though I may have predicted them to be the worst team in MLS history going into last year, the disaster has stretched into the transfer window. Because usually this is the point where like, oh, what's the best addition? But unless I've missed something massive, and I don't think I have, you don't have too many to talk about here, do you?
No, and this has always been the case, is that for some reason Toronto doesn't like signing players early in the preseason or off season. I remember writing an article a couple years ago where a lot of the action usually happened around the end of January and start of February, which was great when our season started mid-March. But unfortunately, we're well into the preseason. TFC's been in Spain, and that was the hope that they were over there doing some deal making and see if they could bring some players in from Europe. So I kind of alluded to it a little bit before, is that last Thursday they had a supporters group Q&A Unfortunately, I wasn't there. I didn't. They don't invite everybody all the time, so it's like you're on a rotating list of who gets invited as season seat holders. Unfortunately, I didn't get the invitation, but I did get the lowdown. So Jason Hernandez, the general manager of TFC, did promise two or three signings within the next 48 to 72 hours. So that was a direct quote. And he said, yes, we're going to bring in a TAM level to a DP striker. And we're all sitting on our hands waiting. And that is a situation where it is nothing new for us as supporters, but it is incredibly frustrating, especially when we start looking around the league and seeing the marquee signings that, and I'm not exaggerating, basically almost every team other than TFC is making, right? And it is certainly the silence is deafening, I guess is the way you want to describe it, is how frustrating it is when we need a significant turnover and need better quality players to come in and be competitive in the Eastern Conference, and you're seeing really no movement of players in and out. Now, that being said, we did have one signing. He's a Canadian international. His name's Theo Corbeanu. And he actually started off in the TFC Academy system, and then left to go to England when he was about 16 or 17. He was in the Wolves system. I think he only maybe made a couple appearances for the senior team, and he's bounced around a couple leagues in Europe. He did play championship with Sheffield Wednesday, and then he was over in Spain before he came back. So I mean, he's on loan. But certainly he's a problem because, for lack of a better explanation, this team has about 15 wingers on the roster, and again, there's one little diminutive Italian winger that we're kind of looking at, going, what are we doing with him? And that is, I think, the domino that everybody's waiting to see going to fall. We hear rumors of, he was supposed to sign here or there. The last rumor was that he was supposed to sign in Turkey with a team, and there was some interest, but again, nothing happened. There was nothing materialized with Insigne. So they're trying to figure that out. And until then, I think until they get an answer, we're really probably just sitting on our hands waiting.
Yeah. And it happened last year. It's a reason why I wasn't so high on them last year was, they went into the season after losing a whole bunch of players and not having a very good season at all, and their answer was one player in a relatively big impact position. And Dayby Flores did well, don't get me wrong. And the problem is this year it's Theo Corbeanu, who, as you mentioned, is the eighth best winger on the team right now, behind the whoever you've got, and he's only on loan. So even if he does start to do something special, it's like, I don't know if there's a purchase option or what have you, but what does that really mean for you? Right? What's a long-term plan there? So, he doesn't really bring the level of player experience that'll raise the level for you. And if you're looking to say, okay, we finished not so great last year, or we missed the playoffs, we want to do something to get in there. Everybody else is getting better around us, and that's the only answer. Not so good. Now, what I will say, and like you mentioned, one of the trends that has been happening on this series since literally day one, where we did Columbus Crew, the very first episode, the day after we recorded, Cucho Hernandez leaves, as does Christian Ramirez. Every other team has made a signing the day after we have recorded. So this is February 10th at 9:22 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So by, I don't know, the next 15 hours, you're probably going to have two or three more that we're not talking about here. So apologies in advance for the people who are listening and saying, why are you not talking about this guy? Because it's just the way this series has worked. What we can talk about, though, are some confirmed losses. Who do you think is probably the biggest loss right now? Maybe excluding the diminutive Italian winger that we have kind of in limbo right now.
Yeah, so we had a lot of, and the easiest way to say it is really just albatross contracts that had been accumulating. No offense against the former Red Bull Ali Curtis GM and Chris Armas coach. It just didn't work out in Toronto for those two. And I didn't wish any ill, anything on that. And they both landed on their feet. And Chris is doing really well in Colorado right now. I think he's got the right personnel. But one of the issues were signing the wrong type of players and signing them to contracts that didn't fit. And they tended to be a lot of players that were just kind of there. So the good thing is there were a lot of players that weren't necessarily impact players that left, but one of the players that I really did think they were going to renegotiate and bring back was Shane O'Neill. And he's a veteran. It's one of those players, the veteran MLS players that have bounced around. He was in Seattle for a while, and he had a couple good years in Toronto. He was plagued by injuries. He had a few concussion issues, which really did impact his playing time. But it's really hard to discount the experience that somebody has in playing in MLS as an MLS veteran. And O'Neill was in his early 30s, so he wasn't he wasn't going to make the starting 11 for 30 games and eat up minutes, but he was the impactful sub that you could get off, and he was kind of versatile as well. He would play center back, he could play on the wing. A lot of the time we didn't know how fast he was because he never had the choice to move forward as a defender, but he actually had some wheels when he came off the bench, and we saw that a few times early on when Herdman's kind of mentality was that move forward and get the high press and get the attack going. I thought he would resign with the club, maybe at a lower rate, because I think he was close to almost $400,000 last year, and that's a lot for somebody sitting on the bench in MLS, right? Especially when you can get somebody a bit younger who can eat up minutes, who can take that half an hour, the 45 every other game or whatever. So it is an issue that is still facing the club with the depth, especially in defense. So to be honest, I think we'll probably miss those minutes that O'Neill did have, and we're waiting to see what will actually happen and defense wise. So
Yeah.
it's a tough loss, I think.
No, I think that's spot on. And of the players that you lost, I don't look at a ton of them and are like, uh-oh, now what are we gonna do, right? And it's tough to do that with a team that didn't do so well last year, right? Usually when teams that are not good release players, it's because they weren't up to the level, right? I think Owusu leaving and at the very moment not having him replaced may be a cause of concern. You'd have very few options up top at the moment. Now, will tomorrow you come in with two number nines at a DP level and a TAM level? Sure, probably. That's the way this thing works. But at the moment, I think that probably leaves you, questioning how are we going to score goals. So that'll be my biggest loss. And usually those losses are tied into somebody needing to step up and fill that role if teams like Toronto are not signing players to do that. So who do you think is a player to watch this year? Maybe that, somebody who can break out and take it to another level.
So we saw a bit of it last year, and he was kind of an unknown coming over from England. Matty Longstaff, who was a young player who came out of the Newcastle system and was kind of bouncing around the lower leagues on loan, and then finally decided, because he probably wasn't going to get that many minutes with his parent club. He was a Newcastle boy. He grew up there. His brother still plays for Newcastle, Sean Longstaff. So he's a tune through and through, right? And I think it probably did help that Herdman is from Newcastle as well and a Newcastle supporter. So he was a bit of an unknown coming over because he was coming off a knee injury, but he actually probably was one of the more standout players near the end of the year as he got more comfortable in his role in the midfield. But the problem we're facing with that is that there's a lot of identity about this team that we've always wanted to see. Is what is the role and what is the formation we're going to see. Hopefully we're going to see Longstaff and probably Captain Jonathan Osorio in the midfield. But the problem with that is Osorio's getting a bit old and he's losing a step. Longstaff did look quite nimble and got a little more comfortable in his role as a midfielder near the end of the season. And he's still young. He's still only 23 years old, and he still had he's got one famous goal, and he scored against Manchester United in his debut for Newcastle, and everybody can go on and watch that goal. It was just a screamer from about 30 yards out. We're still waiting for that, but he did actually have a few goals, and he was a contributor. He wasn't obviously our leading goal scorer, but he did have that offensive kind of prowess to be in the right spot at the right time. And it's just kind of sitting around the box, kind of hanging out at the top of the 18, knowing when to make that run, knowing to kind of get into the mix of it. And I would probably guess that he will probably have a breakout year as he is getting more comfortable with the North American game, which is a bit of a leap for anybody coming over. And I think anybody coming from Europe really underestimate the quality of MLS, and I think that was the adjustment period. I always use that with the David Goss theorem, right?
Yes.
Yeah, where he
So
says the
so
second year is going to be the breakout theory. Yeah, I got to give credit to Goss on that one. So
elite. Okay, so Connor is my co-host. Connor is a 2017 Atlanta United, first day I got him into it. He was usually like, "Oh, I'm only Chelsea. I don't care about MLS." And for the longest time, I kept trying to explain to him the David Goss theorem, to the point where we are going to do our previews. And when we do our previews and predictions, we are predicting who the David Goss theorem player of the year will be this year. Like we're going to pick that player. But my favorite part about this series is that I have met like 7 different people over the last 2 years who have willingly, without me coaxing it out of them, brought up the David Goss theorem,
so
and that might just be
Goss
the
theorem.
best.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might just be the greatest. That is how I know this series is a win, because if you can get anybody talking about the David Goss theorem for fun, you're having a good time. So you are number
Yeah,
one for
well,
me.
there's a lot of us out there that we're really missing extra time now that they've gotten rid of that podcast. I listen religiously twice a
Yeah.
week. Um, and it's just a great way to catch up on how everything's going on around the rest of the league, right? And that's I don't know. I guess I'll have to watch more Apple TV. So
Yeah, yeah. Trust me, we can go into a whole nother episode about that, because that is I think everybody kind of shares the same idea there. But I also mentioned Tyrese Spicer here, just as somebody who maybe might lead the line in the attack. Somebody needs to score goals, and I think I remember him playing at the 9 vaguely. I'll be honest, I didn't watch a ton of TFC last year, but somebody at the moment needs to score goals, and maybe he steps up and does it.
yeah, Spicer was an interesting one because he was our we were expecting somebody different for our first round draft pick. We were
Hmm.
expecting, kind of a homegrown player, a kid who grew up in Toronto, and that was Kamani Stewart Baines, and he
Yes.
wasn't actually drafted by TFC. We were surprised, but he was already set up. He had, I mean, he was drafted from the number one spot, and he had the TFC scarf and everything ready for him in Trinidad when he got drafted. Um, he was actually had a lot of injuries last year. Had a few toe issues and turf toe, and those things are painful and really hard to work through, and it only takes time. Um, so he was playing all over the pitch. He was playing kind of like a wing back position. That was Herdman's favorite thing to do, is to have the two wing backs move forward. But then again, he's a left winger, and unfortunately, we have a diminutive Italian that occupies a lot of real estate. And we've been ruining the day. I think Insigne, by our count, has chased I don't know how many wingers out of our system or out of the team. Um, and that includes Jacob Schaffelberg, because he was having a breakout year with TFC before Insigne got here, and now look him in Nashville, right? So
Yeah.
that's our boy Schaffelberg, and we're missing. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, that'll definitely be a swing and a miss from me then on breakout player, and I will just take it on the chin, because I tried my best. And honestly, I looked at that roster and I was like, I can't find a single person who like the media has hyped up, who I've seen the fans hype up. Like usually I see somebody like in preseason, like, oh, this guy's getting minutes, and keep an eye out for him. I couldn't even find any of that. So this was a shot in the dark, and I missed, and that's okay. So one of the things I will say is, I think it's pretty clear that there are a ton of questions still hanging over Toronto FC heading into 2025. What's the biggest one for you? What's your one big question heading into the season?
I mean, it's pretty obvious for everybody. What the heck are we going to do with the Italians right now? I mean, we're all waiting around to get an answer. The obvious move was to try to sell Insigne over the off season and now into the preseason. We were really hoping in the European window to get an answer about that, and now we're reading articles about not only Insigne but Bernadeschi may be sold somewhere too. And the question is, what will our team identity look like?
Mhm.
Because Bernadeschi was, all intents and purposes, the sole offensive threat that we had on the pitch for most of the season last year. And I still like to take it and stick it to Montreal because he scored a hat trick against Montreal at BMO. That was my favorite moment of the last year, was just to watch that. Um, and I always will take shots at Montreal every chance I get.
Respect. Yeah.
So, anyways, that's what happens. But again, we will be at a significant kind of disadvantage, not only with the roster construction, which is coming up. We don't know how that's going to look. Are we going to keep three DPs? Does that mean the two Italians plus our other DP, Canadian international Richie Larea? He still has the DP designation. So you know what, we're still wondering exactly how things are going to play out, and the biggest question is what's going to happen. The season is 12 days away. That's a early kickoff in DC. It's going to be the 22nd, and we don't know what the roster is going to look like, and will the Italians actually even be around the team, or are they going to be here for the rest of their contract, which Insigne's contract goes until July 2026, and in Bernadeschi's has been extended to 2028. So there's lots of questions, but there's still rumors surrounding both of these players leaving, and very soon. So it's a
Yep.
huge question mark for us.
Yeah, yeah, and mine's very similar, right? Your season starts in 12 days, you have one signing. Are any more coming, and what's down the stretch? Because if you're looking at going through, and again, we like we said, this is February 10th. Window is open till like April 10th. You've got 2 months to figure out something, but with all the movement that was going on in the coaching staff, with all the movement that was kind of happening with everything else outside of the team, like that can usually lead to the slowing of the process of finding and bringing in players. Now, it sounds like that's not the case, but that's kind of my thing is like, where is this transfer period? Like, what, like, kind of bouncing off your idea, like, what is the team identity going to be by the end of this window? Because if you're going to go into this window with this team for 4 months before the summer window opens, it's going to be a long season.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the dark cloud hanging over the team, is that we're just not good enough. The Eastern Conference is quite a competitive conference, as you know. Um, and thank goodness, like, we have teams that are capable of competing against Inter Miami at this point too. We're not crowning them champions right now in the preseason. Um, and look what happened with the Red Bulls, right? A lot of people wrote them off, and bang, two and out, and there you go, right to the MLS Cup final.
That's
And
right.
I was kind of happy to see that. With I'm not one of the Messi haters. He's a fantastic player, but I mean, like, you have great stories all over the league. Like,
Mhm.
look what happened with Emil Forsberg. He made it back for the playoffs, and look at the difference it made, right?
Oh
So I
yeah.
mean, there, and and building upon that, like, looking at how successful teams are when they sign a DP striker, like, you know what I'm saying?
Oh
It's
yeah.
one of those things that you don't have to discount the impact that a DP striker has on teams.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference, right? So
Oh yeah. It 100% does. I could not agree more, and that's why the roster build is such a big question for me because you very rare, not many people can do what like Philadelphia did or what Red Bull have done recently, where it was like, yeah, we're just going to play all the kids, and we'll sneak into the playoffs every year and see what happens, and somebody overperforms once, and like boom, now we're flying, right? But like you kind of said it, this team isn't good enough, but let's put a number or a range to that. What does that mean in terms of the finish? Where is this team finishing this year?
I've done some calculations. I've actually gone through and done my own kind of predictions about where everybody's going to finish in the Eastern Conference.
Uh-huh.
Um, and there's clearly two tiers of teams in the Eastern Conference: the competitive and the really non-competitive. And I would say, TFC, for as much as I want them to put them in the competitive tier, there's no chance that I can say with a straight face that this team's going to be competitive in the Eastern Conference. So they did finish just out of the playoffs last year, and they're going to finish probably 10th or 11th out of the playoffs. Um, just for the fact that there are some truly dreadful teams in the East that will finish worse than they will. And unfortunately, we're not going to, sugarcoat it even in the preseason. And I would love to have the optimism that some people do about the team. But I think after, I don't know how many years of watching the same thing over and over again, there's no chance that we're kind of just going through the motions, I think, now in the preseason a lot with trying to be at least a little optimistic, and it's really hard when you kind of roll into the season with the same roster that you basically finished off the season with, and they had a really really weak finish to the season, right? So and it really just had no real impact on how the playoffs went, and believe it or not, they were still close to qualifying to the playoffs at the on decision day. If they would have won against Miami, they probably still would have made the playoffs, which is unbelievable. And that was like, under 40 points, which is crazy to think about. And that's a pretty low bar to hit, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's another conversation we can have about too many teams make the playoffs, and it's not as meaningful as others. But that's a different story for another day. Last year, I said that Toronto may have been the worst team in MLS history, and then San Jose stepped up and said, "Hold my beer." I don't think it's crazy to say that maybe I was just a year early on that prediction because usually I'm a year early or a year late. I think this team is a bottom three team in the entire league in 2025. I've got them between 13 and 15 in the East, which could end up being, between 28 and 30 in the league. Now, again, I make that comment without whoever comes in the day after we record this, right? But with the current state of the roster right now, and with and which is what led me to the prediction last year, was the uncertainty of the designated players, which seemed like they're more than likely less certain this year, maybe. If they lose those two and they don't bring in the right people to make this work, and we haven't talked about them a lot, but when you talk about like new coaches coming in and like that new coach bounce, Robin Fraser does not look like a coach who is going to energize you to get a new coach bounce out of you. Like we were talking about a couple, a lot of new coaches are coming in. It's like, how long is that new coach bounce going to last? Because you're looking at some of these coaches like Bruce Arena in San Jose. Like, yeah, people are going to run through a wall for Bruce Arena in San Jose. Like, they got all these players. It's going to be crazy. Robin Fraser, it seems like guy is like, okay, guys, let's take it one game at a time and just set and we'll figure it out when we get there. And I'm just not sold on him as a replacement here. Yeah, I'm not thrilled. I think 13 to 15 in the East is not ridiculous.
No, I think I'm probably being optimistic when I said 10th or 11th.
Hmm.
It's one of those things that I have a lot of respect for Robin Fraser. He's done a lot in the league. Stories about him when he was the assistant in Toronto with Greg Vanney, where he was almost a co-coach with Vanney a lot of the time, and it's one of those where he has a lot of experience, he has a lot of knowledge, but he had the players. I
Yes.
don't think you could argue that 2016, 2017 TFC wasn't one of the top five teams ever in Major League Soccer. They were a Marky Delgado missed away from winning the Champions League as well, which
That's
still
right.
haunts. Yeah, and then I'm not even going to get into this team's results and penalties because they don't clearly practice penalties at all.
I feel you. Been
So,
there.
uh, yeah, and it's I can still tell you who missed the penalty and went off the bar in 2016. Thank you, Justin Morrow, for hitting it off the crossbar, and watching Seattle celebrate in our own stadium. But anyways, yeah, it is one of those that I think the club is really kind of, they don't want to come out and embrace the rebuild tag right now, but
Mhm.
every move they're doing is rebuild.
Right.
It is not a situation where they're going out and making those splashy signings. A lot of the signings that we have, and they did make a second signing, and it's quite funny actually that there was a signing, but he was from TFC2. He's the third goalkeeper, and actually he's MLS legend Dwayne De Rosario's son actually
No
that
kidding,
signed.
for real?
Yeah, so that's a flashback, right?
That's funny.
Um, but what they're doing is they're really embracing a lot of the young players, which is finally something they need to do. too many times they've let players either walk away from the academy without giving them the clear pathway to the first or even, TFC2 and the minutes there. And what is happening now is they're signing a lot of the kids from TFC2, which will eat up those minutes. Doesn't mean that they're going to be competitive, but you're going to have a roster construction that is really going to reward youth and that experience. And again, TFC's never had success with the U22 initiative. I think when I'm thinking about it, and I'm going back probably 15 years now to think of Matthias Laba was one of the U22 signings before they messed up the roster construction, had to ship him off to Vancouver, and that was probably the only successful one we've had in our history. It's the one who's still technically on our roster, Cassius Malula, was clearly not capable of playing at an MLS level, and he's been loaned out to some team in Morocco, I think. So hopefully we're trying to get him off the books. But yeah, it's the rebuild tag. They just don't want to come out and say it because who will want to come and watch a team in rebuild mode, right? So it's always the case that they're trying to put butts in seats, but they can't admit it. And unfortunately, like they're really doing every move to do that because I think Robin Fraser will be the stable influence for the 3 years until they start getting the players in they need, right? So
and that's it's disappointing, but it's the way it works sometimes. But Corey, thanks so much for being here, man. This was such a great chat, and I really enjoyed having our conversation today. I want to give you a minute, tell people where to find you and what you do.
Great. Thanks for having me. I really do enjoy coming on to talk football. You can find me on wakingthered.com. I'm on Twitter at Corey __ Brady. There's got to be other Corey Bradys out there that took that moniker. And I'm also on Blue Sky at Corey Brady, Blue Sky. And come check out. I've got lots of good stuff coming out. I primarily do cover Toronto FC, but I am do spend a little time on the Canadian national team if you do want to look in on former Red Bull Jesse Marsh as he's heading up the Canadian national team. Also former Leeds coach as well. So, I mean, I got to give that shout out to him. But yeah, I come and read our stuff. We have lots of articles, really in-depth coverage on Waking the Red of TFC and other things, MLS. And, we're always welcoming comments and interactions. We love it. We love to talk football.
Yeah. Guys, head on over there. Go show them the love. I for one love reading this stuff. I'm more of a reader than if I'm at work, I'll listen to it. But if I have the opportunity, I like to read. So if you're like me, head on over there, go read up on them because they got really good coverage. If this is your first time seeing us, or I say us as if Connor was here, but if your first time seeing the designated players, we are doing 30 of these. You are number 22 of 30. So you can go watch the 21 others that we've done or prepare for the next 8. But make sure you give us a follow, and then because in the season, and we just talk general MLS news, we do a series on MLS history. We actually have a couple of Toronto FC already. The very first win, the seat cushions, I believe, were involved in that game. Danny Dicchio, we covered that one nice and deep. That was a lot of fun, great story. But we do a whole bunch of kind of look backs into some of the biggest moments in MLS history. So, if you like some of that stuff, we are 70 episodes into that series. So that's a really good one I like to do. But yeah, give us a follow and come interact with us as well. Corey, thanks so much for being here. Listeners, thank you so much for given us some of your time. And we will see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.